I want to talk about these vacant Power 5 jobs in the sport as we are approaching just the first week of October. A lot of people are getting already in line to try to go shopping for the next head coach at their Power 5 program. What I find interesting about this is that the jobs that are open now are not necessarily the most desirable, but we've seen some great coaches do a lot more with a lot less. A lot of folks thought that Mike Elko was crazy to leave his post as the defense coordinator at Texas A&M to be the head coach at Duke. He began the season 3-0 and had a really great game with Kansas, which leads me to Lance Leipold, who took a job that most people believed was beneath him. And frankly, that Kansas was going to be a doormat forever in football. He said, no, I think that we have something here. And inside of just 15 months, he has the Jayhawks off to their best start since 2009. And with a win on Saturday, can have the Jayhawks at 6-0 for the first time since 2007. You'll know the last time that happened, Kansas finished the season 12-1 in the Orange Bowl and number 7 in the AP final poll. Again, I'm going to keep shouting it out because he's right about it. Producer Tyler was like, hey, I think this is an 07 season. And I'd say, hey, show me a top 10 Kansas Jayhawks football team. And that's exactly where we are heading. But Leipold came from Wisconsin Whitewater, right? And we know that that is not an FBS program. And it had really looked past jobs in the FCS. But shout out to Danny White, who hired him on at Buffalo. Shout out to Travis Goff, who hired him on at Kansas. Good football coaches are everywhere, just as I tell you all the time. They're great players at all levels of the sport. It's about situation, fit, and did you quit? As long as you have that last one, you can have an opportunity to be great. Now, as I said all of that, and those three men are, well, I should say, Mike Elko's probably going to stay put. Lance Leipold's name is going to keep being mentioned for every job that's vacant now because people are looking at what he did at Kansas and thinking, if you can do it at Kansas, you can do it anywhere, which may or may not be true. But also, because these jobs that we're looking at could go to an HBCU coach like Deion Sanders. And the reason I'm bringing up Deion Sanders here and now before we get into my top 5 list as it relates to these jobs that are open, these 5 jobs that are open, I'm going to rank them for you, is because Deion Sanders made a really great point in his SWAC media day, or I should say his SWAC teleconference call for week 6, in which he said this is the first time that he believes, and I think he's right, that this has happened to an HBCU football coach. As a matter of fact, the quote that he gave was, I think this may be the first time historically that a black man has been mentioned in that aspect at the rate that we've been mentioned ever. I'm happy. I'm elated that colleges would feel as though I got it, and he does. What I got a problem with is y'all trying to give this man a job that I think is relatively hard when he could just stay at Jackson State because they're doing what he asked them to do, and they are looking like they're going to run the table undefeated and win the Black College Football National Championship, to say nothing of maybe even being one of the top 10 teams in the sport in FCS. And that's not without nothing. But you're also getting a lot more when you want to hire on a guy like Deion Sanders. And frankly, I don't think that every Power 5 job that comes open is one that he should be pursued or he should pursue, and one that you should put his name in for. Because I'm starting to think, do y'all want that man to succeed or you just want him to be your head coach? Okay. So let's talk about the 5 openings in the Power 5. And let's go through my list of how I rank those 5 openings in the Power 5 from coaches that have been let go. Let us start with number 5. Take a look here. I got Georgia Tech first there, right? At number 5. Georgia Tech being a program that is in Atlanta, which is a positive. You can recruit the hell out of Georgia if you're not at Georgia Tech. Okay? So the problem Georgia Tech has is that it's what I think Notre Dame would be if Notre Dame was in Atlanta. You have very high academic standards. More power to you. Great engineering school. But you also been playing football forever, and you haven't been good very often because you are absolutely in a fight for every single recruit ever. Case in point here, when I said Notre Dame, do you know where one Kyle Hamilton is from? A little place called Atlanta, Georgia. Do you know who's in the backyard there? Georgia Tech. You know where he went? Notre Dame. Okay? You know that Justin Fields is from the Georgia area, right? He ends up not at Georgia Tech, at Georgia. You know that Trevor Lawrence is from the Georgia area. He ended up not at Georgia Tech, at Clemson. You know that Kirby Smart is going to get whatever he wants because the city of Atlanta bends toward the Bulldogs when we're talking about college football, and the Dirty Falcons whenever we're talking about anything else. when it comes to a fight between the Falcons and the Saints, I end up rooting for the Saints because I was raised in Hattiesburg, and you understand if you were a Saints fan or a Falcons fan that I've just made an enemy. But all to say, I don't know that this is a great job to take. It's difficult to recruit there. You're also playing the ACC, and you're going to be head up against Florida State, North Carolina State, Clemson. I could go on, right? It's just tough there. Number 4 on the list for me, Colorado. You'll know that Jeff Collins being fired at Georgia Tech. Karl Dorrell gets fired at Colorado after a start that has seen the Buffaloes winless. What I find remarkable about this is that I thought he would get more time. I thought he would have an opportunity to try to do it his way for more than just the 1 year, or I should say 2 years, because it comes in 2020 late, and then they seem to have something cooking where they were competitive against Texas in the Alamo Bowl. And then 2021 doesn't go well, and certainly they haven't started off well at Colorado, but I'm also going, what did you expect, Colorado? Okay? No disrespect. This is just facts. You ain't won a conference championship of any kind in 21 years, and you've got one national championship to your credit, 1990. Outside of that, we really got to work hard. We got to work hard to see anything like a good Colorado Buffaloes football team. And you know what? When they were good, Joel Klatt was quarterback, and Vince Young was also quarterback at Texas. No disrespect, right? One of those dudes, one of the greatest college football players of all time. The other, one of the greatest college football analysts of all time, okay? You haven't had another Joel Klatt come through in there in a while, and I dare say you might never get a Vince Young because Colorado just hasn't been that place. You're going to have to give a guy like Karl Dorrell or someone else enough time to establish a culture in which they can recruit around and develop their kind of players, because I think the ceiling for them is in Iowa State, right? Or even in Iowa, where you can play for conference championships on a routine basis, but nobody expects you to compete for national championships. You got to be comfortable with that. And if you're going to fire a guy like Karl Dorrell, who won't you fire? Then number 3 on the list for me is Arizona State. They fire Herm Edwards. That went bad as soon as we found out that they were going to be hit with some NCAA violations that would affect their ability to recruit and or play football. It got even worse as they put money in the bag against Eastern Michigan in a game that you frankly just can't lose. What I find really ridiculous about all of this is the way in which Herm Edwards was let go. Man was fired before he could get to the locker room. That's no way to treat anybody. I mean, I know we make jokes about Lane Kiffin, but I didn't feel good about that either when he was fired inside a building on the tarmac. There's a level of decorum that you need to have when you are dealing with public figures. And if we're going to say, as our man Joel Klatt has, that the most important hire that you're going to make for your university is the football coach, people are going to look at how you treat that football coach when it's not going well. It's not enough to just throw a bag of money at them and say out the door. It's more, especially at that rate, it's less about money as a way of living and more about keeping score. So you have a high buyout because you want to keep the job, not because you want a golden parachute because you're going to do a bad job. And even so, being willing to pay a guy like Karl Dorrell $8.7 million, and who knows how much, I want to say closer to $11 million for a guy like Herm Edwards, what message are you sending to your alumni? You know, if somebody got it, they got it. But at one point or another, you're going to have to find a better way to do this. And I understand everybody wants to get in front of the hiring cycle, but not everybody's going to be able to do what Mike Bone did at USC, okay? Next on this list for me is obviously Nebraska, right? I say obviously because we haven't got to one yet. But Nebraska is an outstanding football job. It's an outstanding football job because of the tradition that it has close by, and also because it has a fan base that is second to none. They're bad, folks. They're awful. They're nowhere near the kind of team I thought they would be. And most people believe that they were going to lose by at least 5 touchdowns to Oklahoma at home. And they sold out the stadium. The place was full for a bad Nebraska team to get dunked on by what is a mid-Oklahoma team with an interim head coach who also happens to be the first black coach of any sport in Nebraska football, or excuse me, Nebraska athletics history. Trev Albert, more power to him, did a really kind thing that I think Joe C did with Brent Venables early in the year. When Mickey Joseph got his first win against Indiana last week, he made sure to give the game ball to Mickey Joseph. Perhaps that's the guy. But knowing that you're willing to pay a guy like Scott Frost $15 million to go away in September, that's a tough gig, man. And you're in the Big Ten, which still makes them feel like strangers to me. It almost feels like Nebraska doesn't know whether they're supposed to be in this conference or not, but you're going to get enough funding and enough people behind you to make that job pretty outstanding if you get it run in the right direction. Problem with that is Nebraska can't recruit the way that it did in the 90s or the 80s. There's no more partial scholarships for you to hand out. There's no more Prop 49 for you to, or Prop 48 for you to use. You can't just go down to Texas and get guys because you're not going to play Oklahoma, Texas, or teams in Texas every year anymore. You're going to play teams in, my goodness, California, Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Ohio, Michigan, Illinois. That's not a place, Indiana. You're not used to recruiting that way and recruiting in those areas and bringing those kids in. Quite frankly, the best high school football played is in Texas, Georgia, Florida, California, and then Ohio. So you get one of those within your conference base. It's not an easy job. Somebody's going to take it, and I think it's a good job, but not anybody's going to take it. Then number one on the list for me is Wisconsin. Wisconsin has proven that they can play for Big Ten championships. As a matter of fact, they felt like that's all that's left to do is to beat an Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game, or Michigan in the Big Ten championship game, or Michigan State, and then get into the college football playoff because they've been very close here in years past. You're going to be able to recruit well. You're going to have an outstanding alumni base and fan base behind you. But I don't think that job is actually open. I think the reason that Paul Chryst got fired is, one, they're losing more games than they're winning, right? But also because everybody knows that Jim Leonhard has been doing an outstanding job as the defensive coordinator at Wisconsin since he got there, and that somebody is going to throw a bag of money at Jim Leonhard in this hiring cycle to try to get him to a Colorado and Arizona State, at Georgia Tech, or Nebraska. So you decided, hey, we're going to make a business decision here. We're going to let Paul Chryst go, and we're going to give this team to the most talented coordinator on the staff and see what he can do with 7 games left to play. Because in that way, you're either going to pay Jim Leonhard to be one of the highest paid defensive coordinators in the country at about $2.5–3 million, or you're going to pay Jim Leonhard to be your head coach at about $4 to $5 million. I think that's just a cost-saving measure by elevating someone to a job that they haven't shown that they can do at a time when it's still cheap for you for them to do the same amount of work. Capitalism at its best right there. Jim Leonhard, I think, is going to do a great job. He's also doing a really awesome job of keeping a lid on what could be an even more volatile and emotional situation. If you're following social at all, you'll see that there are a number of former Wisconsin players who had some things to say about Paul Chryst being let go. They didn't like it, and it was nobody's fun decision to make. And Jim Leonhard's done a great job of just saying, hey, we got some emotional guys here, and my job is to remind them that we love them, that Coach Chryst put us in a place to where we could do this. And in some ways, they feel responsible for Coach Chryst being let down. But hey, man, there's $7 million over there to make him feel a little bit better, even though it feels like this was the wrong way to do it. I don't see another way in which you're going to see Jim Leonhard be your head coach without paying him a lot more money. I understand that one. So that's the way that I see it. Those are, as I rank them, the 5 jobs that are open. Which ones are best for you, for your program, we'll see, right? But I think Wisconsin is going to be in a good spot. I think Nebraska is going to figure it out. I think Arizona State, my goodness, a tremendous alumni base. And frankly, with USC and UCLA leaving the the Pac-12 conference, you get to say, cool, we get to try to keep a lid on Arizona. We get to try to recruit Southern California. So the Bijan Robinsons, Mark Andrews, and Spencer Rattlers of the world, all from Arizona, don't leave us, right? And then there's Georgia Tech. That's just tough. It's tough. Thank you for watching the #1 college football show. Please remember to subscribe to the channel and like this video so that you don't miss any of the best college football coverage in America.